Welcome back, everybody, to Flight Past. And today we're going to continue our journey discovering the 101st Airborne, preparations prior to D-Day. We're going to look at where they took off from, and we'll then discuss some of the missions that the 101st Airborne were expected to achieve on D-Day. If you haven't followed us at this point, we've discussed about Camp Toccoa, Currahee Mountain. We've done Aldbourne. We've done some of the alternative airfields that the 101st used on that on the day, and then we're currently on our way south, heading to RAF Upottery in Devon. So I thought, on the way down, we're going to visit one other airfield, which was used at the time, which was called Merryfield, and then we're going to head down to Upottery. Now, we could talk about the missions that the 101st were given on D-Day. 101st code name for their mission was Operation Albany. The 82nd Airborne was called Operation Boston. Their primary objective was to secure the causeways behind Utah Beach. Behind Utah Beach, there was an area of land that the Germans had flooded, but there were 4 causeways running east-west, and they were tasked to secure the western exits of these causeways, and this would allow the 4th Infantry Division to exit the beach and move inland. Their second objective was to destroy the Saint-Martin-de-Varreville coastal battery. This was a threat to the beach, and it had to be neutralized. The third objective that they had was to capture and control the Barquette Lock, which was on the Douve River, and this was what the Germans were using to control the flooding in the region. And then the fourth objective was to destroy key bridges over the Douve River. 2 highway bridges and a railway bridge near Carentan. And this was to prevent the Germans from bringing up reinforcements from the south. And then once those were done, they were to form a defensive line facing south, basically to form a defensive perimeter to prevent German counterattacks. And one final objective was they hoped that they could achieve was to secure the area between Saint-Martin-de-Varreville and Merryfield. This would be what was going to be designated the exit corridor for the 4th Infantry's exit from the Carentan Peninsula towards Carentan. In contrast with 82nd Airborne, so the 101st Airborne is securing the sort of the eastern side of the Carentan Peninsula and sealing off the south, and the 82nd Airborne would be securing the western side of sort of around Saint-Martin-de-Varreville and sealing off any Germans trying to move down the Carentan from Cherbourg. In terms of timings, the drops, the 101st Airborne were going to be the first ones in. They were going to take off and be around about, I think, something between 3/4 of an hour ahead of the 82nd Airborne. Their route to the target from their takeoff position was coming in from the sort of northwest, and because the 101st Airborne were going to be mainly to the sort of south and the east of Saint-Martin-de-Varreville, their flight path to the target would bring them between Jersey and Guernsey, whereas the 82nd Airborne would be approaching to the north of the Channel Islands. Pathfinders would obviously be going ahead to mark their drop zones. Let's back up a little bit. By the way, back at Greenham Common in the previous episode, Greenham Lodge, which was near Greenham Common, was the divisional headquarters for the 101st. And the troop carrier is the number 9 Troop Carrier Command. They're the ones who are responsible for the massive airlift of the paratroopers. So we know Eisenhower postponed the drop. Easy Company and the 2nd Battalion were moved down to Upottery in late May, sealed in, given their targets and things like that. They used they had sand tables at Upottery, so they weren't allowed any letters to be written or contact with the outside world once the information had got out to the troops. We are heading towards RAF Merryfield at the moment, which is one of the other airfields used. We're just going over sort of the western end of Salisbury Plain. We will the plan. We will fly there to discuss what happens afterwards. We're just talking at the moment about the planning and objectives. Around about 9 o'clock. Sometime between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night, the pathfinders of for the jumps took off. They took off from RAF North Witham in Lincolnshire, and they would fly ahead to mark out these drop zones. And there were 6 drop zones in total, 3 for the 82nd, 3 for the 101st. 101st drop zones were named A, C, and D, and they basically went from and A, C, and D would be A was the furthest north, C was the furthest south. Drop zone A we'll see in the next future episodes. We'll see it's north of Toccoa and Aldbourne, and that was mainly assigned to the 502nd. Drop zone C was near a village called Merryfield, and that was where the 501st predominantly dropped, or hoped to drop. And the 506th parachute infantry regiment, they were dropping on drop zone D. And that was near Angeville-au-Plan. And so each of these drop zones, they're basically to the east of this highway called the RN13 highway. And they were north-south, basically along the line of the exits of the causeways from Utah Beach. Let me see if I've got a different scroll for you to read. Was I? Let's try this as well. So yeah, the takeoff for the main group of the 506th was planned to avoid most of the heavy German defences. As I say, the Pathfinder set off at 9 o'clock from up in Lincolnshire, but the C-47s of 101st didn't take off until around about 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Probably pushing on sort of almost 2 hours later, though the Pathfinder's done further to fly. They headed south-southwest, and we'll recreate this route. And the plan was, as I said, to fly over the approach the coast of France over the western side of the Carentan coast. The 101st would fly in between the Channel Islands. Now, I don't know this, but it makes sense that to do this, they're obviously easy markers to pick up on navigation-wise. He may even have operatives working on the Channel Islands, creating beacons for the planes to follow him. Okay, we look like we're approaching RAF Merryfield. So we are not too far away. This is Somerset. This might be, I think this is RNAS Yeovilton on our left here. I don't think this is the Royal Naval Air Station, I believe. We're going to carry on past this. You can see on the horizon we've got probably Dartmoor coming up to us. We've got Exmoor over here. You've got the Bristol Channel you can see on the right. And this is, I believe, Yeovilton. So yes, they wanted to approach, the 101st wanted to approach from the west. It made sense. You don't want to be coming in over the fleet, which was on the eastern, on the other side. You want to try to avoid as much blue on blue as you can. It also meant that they had there was less flak to experience on that side. Operations had gone ahead. They would be dropping foil to the south of their route, and they were dropping these dummies, Rupert dummies, parachutes that were about a foot high, and then when it landed, it made all this noise. They did this for two reasons. They wanted to make sure the Germans were looking to the south of where the actual drop zone was. They wanted to make it appear that the force was bigger than it actually was. And also, you know, it just creates so much confusion. The pathfinders would move in. They would have dropped onto the drop zones, and they set up their Eureka beacons, and then the lead decoders in each of these sort of V formations had a thing called a Rebecca receiver, and they would be using that to fly in on. And the idea was the flights would take it around about 2 to 3 hours. The 101st would drop, commencing at about 12:30 on June the 6th, and be dropping from about 12:30 to 1 o'clock in the morning onto these pre-marked drop zones. Of course, we can talk about what actually happens, but the main thing to consider is that these airborne troops are trained to expect chaos and to organise themselves quicker than the enemy can grasp what's going on. And in some ways, it's best to be on the drop zones that they're expecting, but in other cases it can sometimes work to the advantage if you can get yourself organised quicker than the Germans could. Okay, so we're approaching here. This is RAF Merryfield. I believe it's still in operation. So this was another one of the airfields that we used. So if we just pause here, jump out, and we can see here, we spoke in the previous section about these concrete, I don't know really what to call them. They're like sort of links, figures of 8, and I believe these were. This is signifies these places where they probably lined up lots of aircraft in preparation to take off. And it might be a sign that there was glider operations here. You know, this is the classic 3-runway RAF World War II kind of thing. The aircraft of the day were more susceptible to crosswinds, and had to operate at all times. So this is why we've got the 3 directions. So that's RAF Merryfield. In the future, I thought I find these previous RAF bases fascinating, and I'll probably do something about each one, do a whole series on them in the future. Let's talk a bit about numbers. The 101st Airborne dropped into Normandy anywhere between 6,600 and 6,900 paratroopers. As I say, they were part of the 101st, 502nd and 506th, including division headquarters elements and support troops. Combined with the 82nd Airborne, there was approximately 13,000 paratroopers dropped on the night, and each of those are of course carrying anywhere between 80 and 100 pounds of equipment, weapons, ammo, radios, explosives. This is Operation, the 101st, as I said, is Operation Albany. It was followed later by planned operation was Operation Chicago, and that would be where the glider reinforcements would come in carrying heavier weapons. And so we're looking at these airfields now that this looks like an airfield. Maybe. There you go. Watch Farm Airstrip. Okay, we should now be approaching the end of our flight. I'd like to thank you for listening this far if you have, and we'll continue next week talking about the 82nd Airborne. But what you can see coming up on the nose now is the former RAF base of Upottery. And so let's just pause here and jump out. So immediately you can see the 3 runway orientation. It was also known, I believe, as Smeethorpe or Smeethorpe. This airfield was built specifically for the war around about 1943, and it had 3 runways, as you can see, and something called T2 hangars. To be honest, I do not know what a T2 hangar is. Just gonna see if I can. I think it's I'm actually on ukairfields.org.uk, and seem to be learning a lot about hangars. I don't know whether it's got a. We go T2 hangar. Wow. Quite a large hangar. I mean, what can you say? It's a hangar. But so they've obviously taken those down, unless they're over here. Could be. It looks like a farmer's taken over this. Can't see where there would be one. Makes sense for them to be possibly over here in this area. This airfield was opened in February 1944, and it was where the US Air Force was stationed. It hosted the 439th Troop Carrier Group, which were the SIGI 47s. And this is the departure point for the 506th Paratroop Infantry Regiment, which obviously includes 2nd Battalion and an Easy Company. And they headed from here towards Drop Zone D. It also supported glider tows of both Horsa and Waco gliders. And it was from this that they provided resupply drops to the paratroopers later, as I say, in Operation Chicago. Post-war, it returned to the RAF and briefly became a US Navy PB4Y1's base, but closed in 1948. And according to my notes, it's now farmland, which you can see, and but there's a heritage centre here. They preserve a control tower. I don't know where that is. They've got artifacts, and some parts of it is used for stock car racing now. You can see some of these zones here, these concrete areas where they will line up, presumably. I think what they did, I'll have to do a bit more research if anybody knows, but I think what they did, they put the gliders on the runway all lined up, ready to go, and then all these C-47s are in these sort of places. They would move up, come onto the runway, presumably, like here, with all the gliders lined up, ready to go, hook up and take off. Okay, that is RAF Upottery. So let's find somewhere to land, and we'll call this the end of the stream. And I know that there's one over here, so let's take off this autopilot and we'll do a quick landing here, and we'll call that the end of the stream. If you like this format, please like, please subscribe. You lovely people. And we're going to come into this airfield here, which is still active. I'm liking this big Beechcraft. I've mentioned it before. It's a little bit faster for me, but I'm not quite used to the controls and the stall speeds. But it seems pretty good. And there we are. Thank you very much then. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.